Welcome to On Cooldown, the weekly WoW news show that's almost unbiased. This week we have NAZJATAR live on the PTR. Stay tuned to get a quick glimpse of the beautiful zone if you haven't had the time to go to the public test realm. Not to mention MECHAGON has been opened, the dungeon of course. Following the usual trend, Blizzard buffs classes they've over-nerfed because, surprisingly, over-nerfing makes a spec unviable. Subtlety rogues are getting their nerfs reversed in PvP, and I personally felt the universe fill with a sigh of relief of most rogues out there. Plus more tanks, buffs and such. The world first race has proved to be one of the most difficult one yet, with the winner taking the spot earlier today. And lastly, let me oil you up.
Well met.
Add a little lube so you can handle some hype. We have the first spoilery dialogue with Thrall in 8.2.
Loktar.
Metzen is back, baby! We miss the king! Welcome, you wonderful nerds, to Friday. That one day where you're free of work and that jackass Steve the supervisor. Ooh, Steve the supervisor. Ooh, Steve wants me to do the report in his favorite layout. Cut him off! Cut him off! Why can't you just do a proper intro, man? Let's kick it with NAZJATAR. On the PTR, we actually don't get to do the intro scenario, which would be a helpful build up to the gorgeous scene. My god, I cannot wait to see this live. The architecture is amazing and it definitely reminds me a bit about Argus, but more in the sense of a totally different feel. The landscape is incredible, the world seems so different than what we were used to until now, and it literally feels like I'm in a different expansion. There are of course the normal quests you would expect to have when helping your new faction, and it seems we also have the new world quest system where as far as I can tell we have a battleground-like feel objective with the world PvP being put back on the table. I'm not going to talk about me being ganked by 3 players because what happens on PTR stays on PTR. And on the topic of Bane and spoilers, from the first storyline quest we get from Lor'themar Throne, not Nathanos, it seems like Bane being captive is the news we will get once we are already in NAZJATAR, meaning that the trip we took getting there could have been orchestrated by Sylvanas, or she simply used it to get Bane. Or maybe he was captured before but nobody realized. Together with NAZJATAR we also have MECHAGON, the actual mega dungeon, and boy is it ever mega. The start of the dungeon is outdoorish and the trash hits decently hard. So far the feel of it is great and I cannot wait for it to hit live servers and do some proper runs. Right now everything is in its testing phase, which is okay. I still got to feel the gnomish atmosphere, inventions everywhere, bots and bobs, and wheels and deals, and the energy in it is really refreshing and a very welcome change of pace. The size of it, judging only from the beginning part, is massive and I'm still on the fence with a number of trash, but at least the scope of it is that of a mini raid, so I'm cool with that. Not to mention that we have objectives going on inside, so it's not just mindlessly working our way from boss to boss. And finishing the PTR updates in the spoilery side, we have our first few voice lines data mined for Thrall, and let me tell you, hearing Metzen say
Loktar
made me warm inside, and for a second I forgot about global warming. Warning, a tad few spoilers ahead though. Although that's very subjective since most of the stuff is not very surprising. Thrall will be part of Mission Rescue Bane, which we probably saw coming. In the vision show to Lor'themar, we can clearly see Sylvanas and a female orc standing to execute Bane, so a confrontation between Thrall and Sylvanas might happen. Although I still think the major 1v1 duel will be between Saurfang and Sylvanas, so maybe Thrall is yet again a peaceful negotiator, a peaceful standby? I don't know. But one voice line in particular shows Thrall addressing Jaina in what would seem a surprise, meaning Jaina will make an appearance. We all know that she sided with Thrall against her father in Theramore, or at the very least stood aside at his death. But we know that Rexxar was the one that killed him, unless I'm remembering wrong. Does Jaina hold a grudge against Thrall? They were kind of the peacekeepers of their respective factions for the beginning years of WoW, until Theramore and the Cataclysm, of course. Will they clash? If so, how many of you think Thrall will win and how many will side with Jaina? I, for one, trying to weed out my Horde bias, think Thrall is almost impossible to beat if he has the support of the elements, since he was one of the biggest catalysts in repairing the world after Deathwing's rampage. We did get a silly argument in Legion that the elements will not aid him anymore and thus he entrusted Doomhammer to the player, which I always considered poor writing, but cannot really condemn it since they needed a good reason to give us the Doomhammer without killing Thrall off. Will that reasoning still apply? We know Jaina is very strong, but I find it hard to believe she has any justified grudge against Thrall. But let's get back to our own cups of tea. Just this week, Subtlety Rogues have received a buff, or have had their nerfs rolled back, at least for PvP. Admittedly, they nerfed them simply from a class balance perspective, though the devs have not said anything about PvE. Have you seen any sub-rogues lately? Or like at all since 8.1? I digress. PvE aside, the nerfs they received in PvP were disgusting, and I have a personal problem when a spec has their damage source nerfed by 33%. Not to mention that it has been removed. So what does this say to me is that the balancing team has no idea what they're doing with the game. They nerfed Sub-Rogue with big numbers because it was performing above their expectations and have had those same nerfs rolled back months later. So it wasn't a balancing decision at all, they just had no idea what to do with Sub, they nerfed it into the ground so they wouldn't have to worry with balancing it at all. And now they come months later metaphorically saying, oh yeah, no, what we thought would fix an issue actually broke something, so instead of balancing the class we're just going to make it like it never happened. Are baseline sub-rogue numbers magically good now? Is it because of gear scaling, in that they scale worse than Assassination and Outlaw so the power difference between them now is not as big? I don't know guys, personally when I see number tweaks in the realms of minus 33% damage, plus 33% damage, makes me think that they have no clue what the spec needs to be balanced, and I know this is a rant, but I feel like this needs to be said. Blizzard tends to do this. They address a spec with issues, they nerf it so hard that nobody plays it because they don't know how to fix it. And the fact that the nerf doesn't mean anything, or at least doesn't impact the game in a negative way, is evident from the fact that they just revoked it. Like, what the fuck? Okay, I know you guys got it the first time I said it, but I still felt the need to waterboard you with all of these explanations. Marcelian plays a lot more rogue PvP than I, and as a first impression, comparing Sub to Assassination, apparently the not really buffs it received are not enough to bring it on par with the other two specs. So what do you guys think? Any Sub players watching this video? Drop a comment down below and let us know what do you think about all of these changes. Moving on to a more positive class changes coming in 8.2. Almost. Vengeance Demon Hunters, Frost Death Knights and Guardian Druids mainly. And no, this is not deja vu. Like I mentioned before, the initial changes that were announced were not all that we would end up seeing. Vengeance Demon Hunters received a 20% buff to damage to Soul Cleave, and this spiked some community feedback. The general impression is that this is not what Vengeance needed to be good, and I agree. Blizzard responded pretty much confirming and not disputing this perception at all. The reason Soul Cleave was buffed is to push it up the priority ladder during the rotation. Spamming Spirit Bomb instead of Soul Cleave is definitely not good class design, but giving us more incentive to spam an ability we refuse to use because it does not help doesn't solve the issue either. The damage is fine, but it's not enough. For me, Soul Cleave always felt like a wet noodle ability. Compare it to Ignore Pain that Pro Warrior have, or maybe Avenger's Shield or Consecration from Pro Paladins. Essentially a resource consumption ability that on the outside is supposed to give us survivability. It's currently miles away from serving the same purpose. And I'm not ignorant, okay? I know these abilities cannot really be compared with each other since each have a unique purpose and an effect that's based on the frequency at which you actually cast these abilities. Frequency which is much higher for Soul Cleave as opposed to say Ignore Pain. But even so, when I play Pro Warrior and hit Ignore Pain, I know why I'm hitting it and what I'm getting out of it. When I press Soul Cleave, I press it because it's just there and I don't want to cap on pain. But maybe I'm seeing this all wrong, so please correct me down in the comments. Frost Decays are getting more buffs to Breath of Sindragosa, which clearly is never going to be swapped out for anything else on the row. The buffs are definitely welcome, but if the devs are not careful, they will make Frost Decay viable, sure, but then it will just turn into another good DPS spec that has no death. That will move the community complaints to the lack of variety in talents and spec versatility. So again, here's hoping we see more upcoming changes to all of these specs. Our friendly neighborhood bear is getting more changes to Iron Fur and Frenzied Regen, which are the main if not the only things being addressed so far. The changes are a bit abstract, since one of the main reasons Guardian has issues at the moment in my opinion is rage. If rage can be fixed so that I don't find myself tanking blows naked, then maybe we can finally address the mindless gameplay they think Guardian needs. In Legion, Guardian was the most played and the best tank overall. The gameplay was simpler than most, and definitely all of the abilities were more efficient, which made him into a powerhouse. That strength was stripped away with losing the artifact ability, which in my opinion had one of the coolest tank mechanics added to the game, the ability to not be CC'd, knock back, etc. We lost that. We lost Mark of Ursal. So if you think Guardian was boring to begin with in Legion, BFA has made it completely unplayable, even for a tank fanatic such as myself. What I'm saying is that I'm glad they're addressing underpowered tanks, but I couldn't care less that I can stack Iron Fur 8 times if that means I will just be spamming more Mangles and more Thrashes to get those 8 stacks. Like, what? Guardian needs more substance to it, since right now it feels like the most diluted spec where it doesn't matter what happens around you, you just spam Thrash and Mangle to get Rage to spam Iron Furs and maybe a Frenzied Regen here and there. That's it. Rinse and repeat. I won't go into the essences changes, since we will most likely see these happen at least once per week until their final implementation. Lastly, let's close it off with a Mythic Race for Crucible of the Storms. Our winner is Pieces from Draenor EU, my server!
Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on, please! Come on!
Come on! Yes! Yes!
I cannot lie and say I'm not happy that these guys are on the same server as I am, and personally I'm just super happy for them. I like Method, I respect Method. Being the champions and holding the belt are two very difficult things to do, and we can all agree that underdogs are lovely to see every now and then. But the actual Mythic Race itself concluded earlier today after many wipes. More than killed Jaden back in Legion, and what's cool is that nobody expected this. I am super happy to see bosses not die 2 days after the raid launched, but still was hoping to see the boss survive at least one reset. I do hope that this doesn't make Blizzard make bosses even easier in the future, since we are already seeing multiple nerfs to Unat and most likely will see even more until 8.2. If you like our weekly WoW news show, make sure to check our latest episode from last week. Or maybe you're interested in class guides, of which we have. Massive shout out to our Patreons. Thank you very much guys for your continuous support. And if you also want to become one of our patrons and join the team, check the link down in the description. Or you can also use our Amazon affiliate link. If you're gonna be buying any Warcraft nerdy stuff off of Amazon, might as well use our link and it will actually help us a lot. Thanks for watching the video and being awesome, and I'll see you next time.